Hi everyone, welcome to another edition of the Svarim Chatter podcast. On this episode of the podcast, I'm going to be joined by Moshe Tzvi Wieder, and we'll be discussing his new Siddur that he published, which is titled Siddur Mimukei Reisav, which is exactly what it sounds like. It's a Siddur, talking about from its sources. It's actually a very unique Siddur, as we'll get into, with pictures of manuscripts and the sources and what the earliest known source for each part of the Siddur is. It's, I should mention, it's also only for weekday, this Siddur, at this point, and we'll talk about it. It's also available. There'll be a link in the show's notes. It's available. It's a self-published. We'll talk about that at the Moshe Tzvi as well. Something is Wieder Press, a self-publishing house where he's publishing a number of books, and you order it and it's print on demand. And we can talk about that maybe at the end of the episode, maybe in a future episode more in depth. So thank you very much, Tzvi, for joining me.
Nachi, thank you so much for having me. It's my pleasure to be here.
Let's start off. Tell the listeners a little bit about yourself and your background.
Sure. So I'm originally from Cleveland, Ohio. And made Aliyah to Eretz Yisrael, to Ma'alot, which is in the north of Eretz Yisrael. It's a little bit of a warm zone right now, warm with an M, and made Aliyah in 2013, so 11 years ago. Straight out of college, I was working in a number of different software companies, in a number of different positions, both in the States and after I made Aliyah. And along with that, kind of on the side, I've always been interested in the Siddur. I'll tell you a story. I was in yeshiva in Yeshiva Sakotel 28 years ago. So one of the great zchuyos of being Yeshivat HaKotel is Rav Nevinsol learned in the Beis Medrash there, and Sheibad L'chaim, and I had a question, to ask Rav Nevinsol, would bother me a little bit, which was in the weekday davenings we have in the Filas Apayim we say every day. And there's a note in the Siddur that says that you're supposed to say "V'anachnu lo neda" sitting down, and then stand up after you say those three words. And that seemed very strange to me, that like you'd stand up in the middle of the paragraph. Or usually when we're standing or sitting or whatever, it's for a whole section of davening. And here was something strange, right, where you have "V'anachnu lo neda" and we're sitting for three words, and then we're standing for the rest of it. So I asked Rav Nevinsol, I said, what is this? So he explained to me that this is the answer he gave, right? That in the Torah we learned that Moshe Rabbeinu is seen davening three different ways: prostrating himself and sitting and standing, and we want to mimic all three ways, and therefore we start obviously kind of laying on our arm, and we want to fulfill the other two, and so that's why we do it. So you get your answer from Rav Nevinsol, and you kind of walk away. But it didn't really make sense to me what he said. Why didn't it make sense? Because we have in the Filas Apayim, you have three parts. You have the beginning when you're falling on your arm, and then you have Shomer Yisrael where you're sitting, and then you have the end V'anachnu lo neda, so you could be standing. So you have three parts. And anyway, we're doing the first two ways of tefillah for the Filas Apayim and for Shomer Yisrael. So why am I not standing at the beginning of V'anachnu lo neda? His answer didn't really answer my question. Didn't really chap what he was saying. So this was like in the back of my mind, right? This is from 28 years ago, just to show you sort of I've always kind of been bothered by different aspects of davening. So fast forward to a little bit over a year ago, when I left my last position in the software world and decided I wanted to dedicate myself full time to kind of researching the Siddur, as it's always been an interest of mine. And I have a lot of notes that I've put together through the years, but never really was able to dedicate myself fully. So I decided I was going to put out the Siddur Mimukei Reisav on Yom Sachol. And so one of the things I was researching, obviously, was in the Filas Apayim. And as I'm digging into the different parts, I'm going through old manuscripts of Siddurim, and what I found is very interesting that Shomer Yisrael is an old tefillah, right? We have records of Shomer Yisrael going back to the Cairo Geniza and old manuscripts of Siddurim 13th, 14th, 15th century. It's there. But it's always there without fail. Every single time that it shows up, it's always there with a note at the beginning which says, for Yemei Tanis, that Shomei Yisrael is specifically intended to be said on fast days, which was, those of us that look at the Siddur nowadays, right, it's part of the regular Nefilas HaPayim. What are you talking about, right? So what happened? So I start digging and researching into what went on. And very interestingly, at the beginning of the 18th century, two things kind of happened within about 15 years of each other. The first thing that happened is that because of the amount of Siddurim that were being published, which became significant as more the Jewish population grew, there started to be a number of Siddurim that were published that were kind of travel Siddurim. And part of the need for travel Siddurim was that they be as small as possible. And what went out the door when you have to kind of make things as small as possible? The instructions, right? And so we find, at the beginning of the 18th century, we find a few Siddurim where Shomei Yisrael is printed in the middle of Nefilas HaPayim, as it would be on a fast day, but without the instruction that this is only to be said on a fast day. And so it's kind of in there, built in as without the qualification. The other thing that's very fascinating that happened is that also at the beginning of the 18th century, a very, very important siddur was published. Siddur Shara Shemayim, is known as Siddur Shla. The Shla left Ha'aros for his after he was nifter, that he wanted a siddur published, and it should be published, and he was very specific about what he wanted. And his grandson published the Siddur Shara Shemayim at the beginning of the 18th century. 1717 was the first fus of Shara Shemayim. And in Shara Shemayim Tfus Rishon, very fascinating, the grandson brings down as follows. He says, my grandfather, the Shla, left me the following note, that he wanted me to print Shomer Yisrael with the nusach in nusach Sfard. The rest of the Siddurs was generally nusach Ashkenaz. He wanted me to print Shomer Yisrael, the nusach of the Sfardim. I, his grandson, understand, I have to respect his wishes and want to and print it in nusach Sfard, but at the same time, I know that the people who are going to buy the siddur want to daven nusach Ashkenaz, and so the Kayim Shneim, I'm going to print, and he writes this whole big note, right at the top, in the middle of Filas HaPayim. I'm going to print them both. So he printed side by side. Shomer Yisrael nusach Sfard, and then Shomer Yisrael nusach Ashkenaz. Slight differences, one extra paragraph, whatever the case may be. It's not important. With a big, note at the top that the Shla said that this should be printed here. I think those two things in concert at the beginning of the 18th century, the fact that you had in what ended up being the Siddur Shara Shemayim ended up being the most printed siddur in the 18th century. It was printed, I think, more than 60 times during the course of the 18th century, something wild like that. And with in big, bold, Shomer Yisrael is printed twice with a note that the Shla wanted to be said in nusach Sfard, and then you have Siddurim that are printed without the instruction at all. So it ended up causing and within 10, 15 years afterwards, you already start seeing B'yesh Omrim B'chol Yom, right, on the top of Shomer Yisrael, and then we get to the point where we are today, right, where it's relatively ubiquitous that it's said every day. So this all by circumvent as I'm learning this, I'm realizing, so that's what Rav Nebenzahl meant, right? When he told me that we have to do it in V'anachnu lo neda, we have to sit and then stand because we want it to be Mekayim all three. Shomer Yisrael is not nechshav, right? Shomer Yisrael is an addition that happened much, much later than the rest of Nefilas HaPayim. And Nusach HaGra, by the way, doesn't say Shomer Yisrael. They're very careful to try to keep minhagim, and so that's what Rav Nebenzahl meant, right? And again, why it's important to do this research and to really understand where things are coming from. So that's a kind of a long circuitous route to get back to your question of my background. The siddur has always been sort of an interest of mine and something that I found very, very fascinating. And I had the opportunity now in my life, Baruch Hashem, where I could dedicate myself to kind of being a liturgical archaeologist, and I really kind of view it that way as digging down really deep into the sources of things and understanding where they came from.
Yes, you certainly answered my next question of why you decided to publish your own siddur. It's clear your enthusiasm for the topic, why you decided to go about it. And we're going to get into the specifics of this siddur because it is quite unique. With the visual of the pictures, the manuscripts by each passage, with the sources, with the timeline of when the earliest, time that we know of it from, etc. So we'll get into more of that. But to start off, this is something that you just touched on, but just to emphasize it here in the beginning. Which is, why does the history of it matter? A lot of this siddur is siddur mikaresav. It's from its sources. It's showing the earliest known manuscript. It's giving you the source, giving you the timeline. Why does that matter? Today we have, someone sitting here today saying, I have a siddur. I say what I say. I'm nusach Sfard. I'm Ashkenaz. I'm whatever nusach I daven. It could be, Idut Mizrach, etc. I daven my nusach. This is what I daven. This is what I say. The Pirush HaMilim is what matters. I need to understand what I'm saying. I need to have kavanas maybe. But why does this matter? The development doesn't only matter where we are today.
Yeah, so it's a great question and an important question. For the people out there that are able to connect well with the Kadosh Baruch Hu 3 times a day with the davening, with the siddur that they have, maybe they don't need this, right? I think, however, that's the minority of Yidden. One of our great challenges, right, in davening is we're supposed to be having this intimate conversation with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and somebody's handed us essentially a script to use to have that conversation. It's very awkward, right? If I told you you need to now have an important conversation with your wife, your boss, whatever, right? And you can only use these 40 preset phrases, right? And now go and have that conversation. Imagine how difficult and awkward that would be. And it's not because you don't know what the words mean, right? You know what the words is. English, give you English text, right? But the concept of having to connect to a Kadosh Baruch Hu with a script in words which we don't understand why these were chosen in order to create that connection makes davening really, really, really challenging. And we want to understand why, right? Why was it selected that we should say this here, and why was it selected? How did this come about? And that will help us understand, right? And help us, God willing, help us connect a little bit better to our tefillah. And the bedrock of understanding why is when, right? Because there are a lot of people that have come up with theories about why we say certain things, but as I've dug deeper into things, many of those theories can't possibly be correct. Just because historically, right, the timelines for those things don't actually work out, and so it's not. We don't always have answers. Unfortunately, things developed in the siddur. We look at the siddur today and we think, there's this relatively kind of fixed book, and it's been that way for the last 1,000 years and hasn't changed, and it's really not. There's very, very little that we say today, which is exactly the same as what we said 1,000 years ago, whether it be tefillot that were added or words that have been changed or whatever the case may be. There's been a just unbelievable amount of changes to davening over that course of time, and most of the time, unfortunately, we don't have the why. We don't know why these things have come about, but at least to start answering the why, we need to understand when it happened, right? Because that at least will give us some framework for the why. Just maybe to make it a little bit more concrete, so it's not so conceptual. I think a lot of things in the Siddur, people believe that we say because of Kabbalah and the Ari, and for certain people that may be very meaningful, and for certain other people that may be very off-putting, right? To say that we say something al pi Kabbalah, I'm not going to understand why we do that, right? It's something out there, and how am I possibly going to understand it? The truth is, when I went through the siddur, at least for the weekday siddur, there's very, very, very few things that actually come from the Ari. A lot of the things that are said that they come from the Ari actually come from hundreds of years before the Ari were nuschot that were around. A lot of times nusach sfar, not the modern nusach sfar, but the nusach that they actually said in Spain. And it may be that the Ari had a hand in making it more popular because people adopted sort of different nuschot based on his suggestions, but those nuschot predate him by quite a bit, and so the more accuracy that we can have, the more facts we can have about when things came about, I think is helpful to people in connecting with the text of the Siddur.
Okay, so let's talk about the Siddur itself and what you did a little bit, and meaning generally speaking, before we dive into specifics. So first of all, I did a short YouTube video on my YouTube channel, about 6 minutes. You can check. Anyone interested can check that out so you can see it. I'll put a link in the show's notes. You can actually visualize and see a little bit what's going on in the Siddur. There's also a link in the show's notes where you can check it out on the website. There's a sample there. And we're going to discuss much more in depth, and you'll be able to explain more than I did in the video, but at least just for a little, kind of something short. So the Siddur is something just that you did. It's not like it is not your garden variety Siddur that you pick up. It's not even kind of unique Siddur. It's like unique, like extremely unique. So it's just, and we'll talk about if someone can even use this to daven from, like in a regular tefillah. But essentially, As I mentioned in the beginning, there's a little gray box on the top telling you the earliest time when it's brought down. There's the Shina Nuschais on the side when you have, and then I'm sorry, you should mention you have the actual passage on the right hand part of the page. You have the Shina Nuschais next to it, and then you'll have a picture of the earliest known manuscript or the printed Siddur sometime, and and then throughout it you have. To the Shina Nuschais, you'll have the kind of notes. You have notes to the bottom. So you have notes, Shina Nuschais, you have a whole bunch of different things going on. Let's explain. If you can explain a little bit to the listener what it is that the Siddur, generally speaking, before we dive in a little deeper, that there's questions I've been asked. Why do you have a picture of a manuscript? What does that, add? And things like that. We'll get to that. Just to give a general overview of this Siddur so the listener can appreciate and understand at least what we're talking about and what's unique about it.
Yeah, sure, Nachi. So, and I think you did a nice job, both in your kind of short video review and just now. But basically, it's a full Siddur for Yom Ha'Chol. So it has starting from waking up in the morning all the way through the end of Shacharis. It has Kriyas Torah in the back for the weekday. Mincha, Mariv, Kriyas Shema Shalamita, Tefillah for Rosh Chodesh. So everything you kind of expect in a normal weekday Siddur. I didn't get into some of the more obscure things that show up in weekday Siddurim in terms of like all the different Berchos HaRe'iyah and stuff like that. But the idea basically is to take each tefillah as it is today and to figure out where the first place it was. And I looked at kind of two different aspects. First of all, where the tefillah itself came from. So sometimes you have like something like Ashrei, right? So Ashrei is Tilal David, right? Technically, right? Is Mizmor in Tehillim, and so I know where the text came from. But then in addition to that, it's also when is the first time that we have a record of it being used in tefillah, right? So sometimes that's the Mishnayos are mentioning that it was used in the Beis Hamikdash, and then you have all the way from then. To things that popped up in the Siddur 100 years ago or whatever the case may be, and so I've kind of for every single part of the tefillah went through, and some of them you have are built in layers, right? So sometimes it might be that and again Ashrei is a fair example, right? You have Tilal David, which is the core sort of middle of Ashrei, which is Mizmor and Tehillim, but then you also have Psukim at the beginning and a pasuk at the end, right, that were added on, and so not just for the main piece, but also for those add-ons, right, when those happened as well, and so from a certain perspective, it's a reference book, right? Because if you ever are interested in learning about a particular tefillah, you can go and to that tefillah in the Siddur and look it up. And have your and have the background, and in that sense, it is it has a luxury of being a reference book, because one of the challenges of reference books in general is how are people going to find what they're looking for, right? Like I have to find the right exact search, the right term in the index in order to know what page to take me to. Here we don't have that problem. We don't have the luxury. We have the luxury of everybody, basically understands the layout of the Siddur and the order that things are in. And so, from a certain perspective, it's kind of set up as a reference book but easy to find things. It actually also is a functional Siddur that's there as well. And to your question about the visual of the manuscript on the page as well, and what is that adding to the experience. So I think there is a couple different aspects to that visual component. First of all, I think it's really moving sometimes to see the tefillah as it was 1,000 years ago, right? To see the page of a siddur that Yidden davened with 1,000 years ago, 1,100 years ago, right in front of you, next to the tefillah that you're davening, is meaningful in and of itself, and I think inspires certain kavana. But in addition to that, it's also fascinating to look at those kitvei yad and to see the differences in the script and how they wrote, the differences in the language and what they use, the nuschos. I think it's all very, very fascinating and interesting, and adds a nice dimension to the experience as well.
What nusach did you use for the Siddur? Obviously, that's a hard thing to do. You're setting out to do a Siddur. The nusach is always moving and changing. So what did you decide to do for the Siddur?
Yeah, so it's I think, I understand we asked the question because it's when anybody thinks about buying a siddur, it's the first question you ask, right? Is you need to make sure that it's the nusach that you need. I think for this siddur in particular, it's almost not important, and I'll try to explain. So, of course, because of one of the things that I'm doing in the siddur is I am comparing the text that we have today with the text in Siddur of Amram and Siddur of Sadia and the Machzor Vitri and the oldest text that we have. There has to be some decision about what is the text that we have today, right? Just in order for in any kind of critical work, you have to make a decision on what the nusach pnim is. So the nusach pnim of the siddur is what I'd call kind of common nusach Ashkenaz, right? And I wanted to be very careful about not changing the nusach in any way, right? The goal here is not to be revisionist in the tefillah and to make changes based on what early manuscripts were, but rather, keep the tefillah today as it is, but also expose people to what those earlier nuschos were. So nusach pnim is Ashkenaz, but it's inclusive in that when there are tefillot that don't exist in nusach Ashkenaz. So, for example, Ptach Eliyahu to say before davening, or Mizmor Kuf Kaf Aleph before Aleinu at Mariv, like the Sfardim say. So I've included those things as well, right? So it should be a superset, right, of all the tefillot that generally speaking, right, that are most commonly said, and so there is nusach Ashkenaz as a nusach pnim, but really it's kind of covering all the nuschos, because ultimately when you're talking about the texts from the Cairo Geniza, which I imagine we'll get into in a little bit, or Seder of Amram or Seder of Sadia, right? Those are really before the nuschos that we have today existed, right? There wasn't nusach Ashkenaz in the time of, at least not that we have a record of, in the time of the early Geniza, and so a lot of the texts are predate the nusach question as we would have it today. Again, the goal being to kind of show the roots of where things come from. And the benefit of that, I think, also is this is like a larger point to kind of think about. But one of the things that I was hoping to accomplish with the siddur is for people to realize the changes that have taken place during the course of history with the text and with the Siddur. And while we were, even we're in Galus, I think the very strict adherence to, this is my nusach, and I've got to say it exactly this way, it was really important for us as Klal Yisrael, because we had to, as much as possible, hold on to what we had. I think as Yidden are, increasingly moving to Eretz Yisrael and coalescing here, the concept of being a little bit more flexible, and it's very common in Eretz Yisrael, right, to have Batei Knesset where kind of there's flexibility, even not just among these palim, but even the chazan, who goes up, right? There's different sidurim up front, and you can pick kind of whatever nusach you prefer, and that concept, I think, is becoming increasingly important. God willing, one day, not too in the far future, Nachi, you and I will get to meet in person in Yerushalayim outside the Beis Hamikdash, and we're going to daven mincha, and there's going to be a need to have a minyan, and I can't fathom that at that moment we're going to break up into a bunch of different groups to daven a bunch of different nuschos, right? And so I think the a little bit to kind of shake ourselves of the very specific rigid nusach concept, I think is something kind of important to start thinking about, at least for that. And the Siddur, like I said, it is technically nusach Ashkenaz, but really is nusach agnostic to a certain extent.
So obviously there's the other parts of the manuscript and the source and things like that, but can someone use this as a daily Siddur as it pertains? Of course, understanding what you said about nusach, but someone who says, okay, but I want to take it to my shul, I want to use it today with the nusach and davening. Can I take this, and is this usable as my, daily Siddur?
Yeah, absolutely. So, the intended audience for the Siddur is really two different groups, and I think when I say two different groups, it's really two different personas, right? Because I think many of us share aspects of each of these different personas, right? And so the first one is for the Adam Pashut, the Yid who davens, three times a day and just wants to connect better to HaKadosh Baruch Hu and have a better davening experience. So there's something to be said, and I think some of the Achronim even talk about the importance of switching up your Siddur every once in a while, just to kind of get yourself out of the rut, right? We all have Siddurim that have different things written on the side, halachos and perush amilim and whatever, but you get used to it after a certain while, and so it's good every once in a while to switch your Siddur and have a little bit of a different experience, expose yourself to something a little bit different, and so it absolutely can be used and is intended to be used that way, and to add to people's davening experience. A lot of times, when you're davening, maybe you're davening a little bit faster than the shots, or maybe during Chazar shots, your mind is wandering a little bit, or whatever the case may be, and so you have an opportunity right at those times to kind of enrich your experience a little bit, and as opposed to thinking in other areas that have nothing to do with davening, keep your focus on davening and just expose yourself and learn something new about one of the tefillos, whatever the case may be. And so certainly it's intended to be used that way. And there are people using it that way. I've gotten feedback from a number of different people that they've used it as they've started using it as a daily Siddur, and it's been great for them. And then the other persona is, of course, kind of what we referenced earlier, which is as a reference book. If you're interested in researching a part of the Siddur because you want to learn more about it, because you're giving a shir dvar Torah chabura about a particular aspect of the Siddur, there are unfortunately there are not a lot of works out there that really have delved into the history properly about what's going on. When I say properly, there certainly have been svarim published in the past about the history of different aspects of the Siddur. most of them are lacking either on the scholarly side or on the rabbinic side. So you have Sfarim that were published by, say, books, academic books, right? They were published by Ismar Elbogen, right, famously, or Tzunz, or some other scholars, who have done some scholarly work in that area. Unfortunately, both of the two that I just mentioned predated the Geniza discovery, and so a lot of what they've said has been outdated significantly based on those discoveries. Then you have a lot of rabbinic Sfarim, Makori Atfilos and Makor Atfila, all different kinds of things like that. But those focus only on the rabbinic sources and ignore all the kitvei yad of the Siddurim that we have and the findings from the Geniza. And so there really hasn't been a sefer like this that has brought together sort of the fusion of all the known research that we have, at least as best as I was able to put it together, in terms of the history of things. And so the second persona is people that want a reference point for the Siddur to understand when this came into davening. If when it came in, we have a reason. What that reason was. Tshuvos of the Gaonim that deal with that. What are the main kind of textual variants that existed way back when? And this presents all of that to the user. And so, as I said, I think many of us fall into both of those categories, right? Where sometimes we'll use it as a reference book, and sometimes also we might want to use it as a daily siddur to improve our connection.
So interestingly, about kind of similar, related to nusach, but not exactly nusach, which is gersais and shinu nuschayis, as I mentioned earlier, which is when you're talking about textual variants. Some parts of the siddur have a lot, and some part have very little. And just flipping through your siddur, you can see that right away, because those notes are on the side. Just in general, is there a reason why, have you come across in your research, why some parts we have more variants and some less?
I mean, so some of the parts that we have are kind of straight from Tanakh, right? And so when you have parts that are straight from Tanakh, Baruch Hashem, right? There aren't variants there. Is actually one of the miracles, right? That there aren't variants, because one of the things that I've learned over the course of this, my in-depth research is, the more and more things are copied, the more and more kind of variation it comes into, not a big chiddush, right? But the amount of variation that comes as a result of things being copied over is very significant, and it's kind of a nace that the Masorah that we have has been kept. And so when you have Kriyas Shema, you have Mizmorim after Ashrei and things like that, right? It's just straight text, right? There's not a ton of changes in the nusach there. In the siddur, what I tried to do in those areas is focus on a couple different things. One is we still don't necessarily just because the text doesn't have textual variants doesn't mean it's straightforward when the text got put there, right? When those 5 mizmorim after Ashrei started being said and why they started being said isn't necessarily so pashut, and I talk about that in the siddur. Kriyat Shema, you say, well, it's obvious for Kriyat Shema, but even Kriyat Shema, the third parsha of Kriyat Shema, Parsha Tzitzis at night, was not straightforward necessarily that we say Parsha Tzitzis in Kriyat Shema at night, Laila Lavzman Tzitzis, and so that's one of the things that I touch on in those areas. But the other thing also is I use the visual parts of those pages to draw out different aspects of the manuscripts, right? And so whether it be in Kriyat Shema, where I bring I found something very interesting in the Geniza from about the year 900. I found a ktav of Kriyat Shema that starts on the top of the piece of cloth and goes down to the bottom. And the bottom, I think it's in the middle of the second paragraph. And then you flip it over and continue on the next side. But the way you flip it over, it's not like you would expect when you flip a page where the text continues at the top of the page like you started. Rather, when you flip it over, you flip it from the bottom to the top. And so it's almost like it seems to be somebody had a Kriyat Shema card, right? Much like you'd find next to any of our beds, right, where you have a Kriyat Shema Lamita card, which has Kriyat Shema. So you have here Shema, and then you flip it up, right? And it can do. It's clearly not part of a book to be used that way, but a standalone kind of piece of cloth with Kriyat Shema on it. And so I use those pages where there isn't a lot of textual variance to kind of expose other interesting aspects of the manuscripts that I came across.
So in your research, I'm just curious, I was talking about this to Shirley Bornstein recently. Is Brit Shmei the latest edition? What's the most recent addition to the Siddur in our standard, kind of the standard nusach tefillah? Is that it, or is it something else?
So first of all, I mentioned earlier. Shomer Yisrael. Shomer Yisrael is the beginning of the 18th century is fairly recent. Brit Shmei is earlier than that, right? Brit Shmei,
that's true.
Was that early? Brit Shmei in and of itself, by the way, is really a fascinating. If you have a couple minutes,
go ahead. Sure.
So, right, if you look at any siddur that's published now, where's Brit Shmei from? Everybody knows where Brit Shmei is from. Nafi, where's Brit Shmei from?
It's from the Zohar.
From the Zohar, right? That's what it says in the siddur. Right? Would it shock your pants off to find out that it's not from the Zohar?
This is, and I discussed this in the short video. I mean, that's the standard Zohar, and we did, I did mention this passage in that little YouTube video for those interested.
Yeah. So I started, as I do with every part of the tefillah, I started researching, and I went back to the earliest source. So if I need the earliest source for Brit Shmei, I need to go in the Zohar. I need to go to the Kitvei Yad of the Zohar. I need to find the earliest Ktav Yad that we have of the Zohar in order to be able to present that to the reader in the Siddur. So I started, digging through the earliest Kitvei Yad that we have of the Zohar. We have, 20 Kitvei Yad, I would say, from the 14th, 15th, 16th century, and looking through them, and I couldn't find it, which I'm not perfect, right? I might have missed it. Also, the Zohar notoriously is very kind of eclectic. There's a few kind of more complete manuscripts, but then there's a lot of fragmented pieces here and there that needed to be kind of all woven together to come up with the book of the Zohar that was eventually printed in Mantua, but I couldn't find it. And so as I've done throughout my research, I reached out to experts in the field to help me. So there's a guy named Daniel Matt, who was a professor in California in Stanford, and he put out a critical edition of the Zohar. And I shot him an email. I explained to him what I'm doing, and can you help me find? I can't find it. Can you help me find it? And he says, you wouldn't believe it, but you're not going to find it in any of the old manuscripts. And he pointed me to a fantastic article that Professor Abishai Bar Asher wrote on the topic. And as it turns out, Brit Shmei doesn't exist in any of the Kitvei Yad of the Zohar that we have prior to the initial printing of the Zohar in the later 16th century. It's not found anywhere. The first place it shows up, there's a sefer called Levias Chen, and it shows up there as a quote from the Zohar in the year 1556. And then the Zohar was printed a few years later. When the Zohar was printed a few years later, Mantua, it's included in that printing in the Zohar. Interestingly, Rav Moshe Cordovero, the Ramak, wrote a commentary called Or Yakar on the Zohar, and he writes in that commentary, which is somewhat contemporaneous with the publication of the Zohar. I don't think this passage belongs here, he says, right? And he writes over there. So at this point, I'm looking. I get in touch with Professor Bar Asher, and it turns out we have several records of Brit Shmei prior to the printing of the Zohar. They're just not from the Zohar. They're in various Siddurim or Sfarim of Tfilos, and two of the older ones that we have from the early 1400s actually say very explicitly who the author of Brit Shmei is, and I include one of them in the Sidur's beautiful calligraphy. You can read in a full page picture there, and it says that Brit Shmei is a tefillah of the Ramban of Nachmanides, and so. You mentioned kind of Brit Shmei. I couldn't help myself in going into one of the kind of really surprising things that turned up during my research. But part of what I wanted to do in presenting the Siddur is also bring together the best and latest scholarship that exists for various places as well in the Siddur, so Professor Bar Asher in this case, did a lot of research, and I include that article and reference to it, in a number of different places, professors and people Rabbanim who are very learned in particular areas have dug up things that just aren't well known, and so I wanted to kind of bring those to people's view as well. So, to get back to your question now, that I've taken the side road, the most recent addition to the Siddur. So it's an interesting question because I guess I'll answer it the way I want to answer it, but it may not necessarily mean what you wanted to say. Saying on Aser Simei Tshuva, saying Oseh Hashalom in Kaddish Dirabanan, that in Kaddish Yasom, especially the ones that are said before davening, before Shemona Esrei, that's like. From I think the earliest source I was able to find from that is in the 1960s. It's really so you're looking at something that's 60 years old in the Siddur that we have.
Okay, so be that as it may, and there are therefore questions of when things came from, when it ended up in our Siddurim, especially the Nuschayis is a question. Also, you have this extensive sheet of Nuschayis, and like you said, you can find in other places. What do we do? What does someone do that reads your Siddur or reads in general? They say, okay, oh my goodness, this is very late. I'm not going to say this. Or this nusach, this is wrong. This is other nusach. Let me change around, not the nusach like Sarat Ashkenaz, but like the text. Let me change the text. Let me read it now this way. This, critical edition, this academic version of whatever. I don't mean as an academic, but like, to use the term. So is that what someone should be doing with this? Like what should, or is it just purely a kind of an exercise to know what it was, what originally was, and how it came to what it was today? But we still say, well, we have a Messiah on, we still daven, the way that each of us individually is brought up to daven.
Yeah, so it's a great question, and one that I'm not going to touch. I'm not a bar samcha, right? To be, to go and make changes in people's language. That's why I said, kind of originally I was very careful, in putting out the Siddur. I kept the nusach as I didn't touch the nusach. The nusach that we have today, you can have different viewpoints about how we got here. One viewpoint is maybe some of the reasons, at least that it looks like how we got there, is from a mistake, and if it's a mistake, then shouldn't we fix it? And then a different viewpoint is, Kadosh Baruch Hu is Sovev Olamos, right? And so if he wanted something to be a certain way, it might not have been that way originally, but he brought about us coming to the place where we are right now, and maybe it's not appropriate for us to change it. I talk a little bit in the. I have ha'aros that I put in the Siddur. It's only in English. In the Hakdama to the Siddur, I translated completely. It's in the front of the book in Hebrew and in the back of the book in English. But there's also ha'aros that I added, just kind of my own thoughts about things that I noticed, kind of in putting the Siddur together, that I did just in English. And so I talk there about the role that that different authorities in relation to the Siddur saw themselves having over the course of the years, and the impact of those changes. Some felt that it was their role to preserve exactly kind of what the original intention was, and so they would change things based on what they thought the original intention was. Other people change things based on, I don't care what the original intention was, the grammar should be correct. Here are the rules of grammar, and we need to fix, the text relative to those rules of grammar, right? And so, a lot of changes have taken place over the course of many, many years, hundreds and hundreds of years, in those areas. I'm not a bar samcha to authorize anybody to make any changes. If there are changes you want to make, I encourage you to, if you're not yourself a bar samcha, go discuss it with your rav, and follow that guidance. But that's not inherently sort of the purpose of the background.
So when you cite to Shinui Nusachos, do you use something? Well, not do you something that you do. Sometimes you cite to manuscript editions of Sfarim Maril, and maybe we can get to that. That has to do with you publishing manuscripts through your press as well. But you cite to manuscript as opposed to printed Sfarim, which you do as well. Is there a reason why you do that?
Yeah. So one of the important things that I found is that, unfortunately, a lot of times the printed version of the Sefer isn't necessarily accurate to what was originally written. Sometimes it could, you can chalk that up to, oh, well, the printed version was based on a manuscript that, we don't have that manuscript anymore, so that's why, it looks different. But oftentimes it's very clear that that's not the situation. And in addition to that, oftentimes, as in the case with, you mentioned the Maharil. So the Maharil is very fascinating. Obviously, just by way of background for people that don't know, right? Sefer Maharil or Sefer Minhagim, very important, maybe the most foundational Sefer that we have from nusach Ashkenaz as far as the different customs that were in place and were established. And the Sefer was written by the Maharil's student. His last name was from Sadigura, from Sengur. And what's fascinating about the Maharil, and it's very unusual, right? We're really not used to this kind of concept. We have, I think, over 20 different kitvei yad of the Maharil from within 200 years, let's say, of when the Maharil was nifter and the Sefer was written. Not a single one matches the other one, and the changes are not just a few words here, a few words there. They are dramatic, massive changes. The order of prakim is different. The sentences are different. It's really wild, sort of what it is. And you mentioned that I was motzi ksav yad, so I'll mention in a second. But one of the things that I theorized there in the Hakdama is that it seems like the Talmud never intended there to be sort of a fixed text of this is Sefer Maharil, but rather he was asked from time to time to write down what the minhagim were of the Maharil, and he sort of did that. And maybe he was in a constant, maybe he referred to a previous version that he did and he improved upon it the next time he wrote it, or maybe one time he remembered something and one time he didn't, but you end up with those manuscripts. It's kind of very, there isn't a single text, but you end up with multiple different ones. There was a critical edition of Sefer Maharil that was put out by Mechon Yerushalayim Be'erev Spiegel in the 1970s, I believe, and obviously that's really important when you have a sefer like this to understand. However, more kitvei yad have come to light since then, including a very important kitav yad that was in the library in Russia, in St. Petersburg, in Moscow, in the National Library in Russia, that we didn't have access to. He didn't have access to it, right, because they are in Curtin, and it's a relatively it's a manuscript from the time that the Maharil's Talmud was alive, contemporaneous, right, and so it's as valid as any other of the kitvei yad, those early kitvei yad from his lifetime. And there are a number of things there that we don't find in any other kitav yad of the Maharil. And so one of the examples is that by Hagba. If people aren't familiar, the concept of Hagba is very old, right? We have in Tanakh, where it talks about the king went to read and they did Hagba and they showed the Ktav. And it's brought down in Masachet Sofrim and to do Hagba as well. But the original minhag, as it's explained, is to do Hagba before Kriyas HaTorah, not after Kriyas HaTorah. That's what the Eidot HaMizrach still to this day, right? They do Hagba before and not after. But in nusach Ashkenaz we do Hagba after Kriyas HaTorah. Where did that minhag start? Where did that come from? And so I was looking into that, right, and try to understand the first place where that's mentioned. And the Maharil, there's a passage in the Maharil, in the printed Maharil. If you look in all of the Kitvei Yad in the critical edition, it says that the Maharil is makpid when he did Hagba to show the text to the people around him. Okay. Right, that's kind of expected, the normal thing. But in this Ktav Yad Ginsburg 929 from that Spiegel didn't have, I found there it says very clearly that the minhag of the Maharil was when he did Hagba achar hakriya. That he was going to show the text to the people, and so that actually is the first kind of proven location that we have for the custom of doing Hagba after Kriyas HaTorah. And you only get there, right, by looking at the manuscript and not the print edition. So that case, you can say, oh, that's a little bit of a you did a lot of work and you found something very important, but that's not so critical that everybody looks at the Kitvei Yad. The Machzor Vitri was published in the 19th century. Machzor Vitri by the base Medrash of Rashi, Rav Simcha Vitri, and it was published in the 19th century. Based on a particular manuscript, which was relatively early. It was a 13th century manuscript, which we still have today. Since then, and that was the edition, right, of Machzor Vitri for up until, I don't know, 10 years ago or so. That was the edition that everybody used. All of the scholarship, all of the Siddur scholarship that existed that wanted to quote Machzor Vitri, that is based on what is in Machzor Vitri, is based on that edition. In that time period, we've come across many other Kitvei Yad of Machzor Vitri, and we now know conclusively, and this is Rav Aryeh Goldschmidt, who put out a critical edition of Machzor Vitri, within the last 10 years, and just put out a revised edition, additional volumes, I think a year ago. He proves very conclusively in his Hakdama. We now know very well that the Ktav Yad that printed Machzor Vitri is based on is very far from Machzor Vitri. There's a ton of additions in it that were not in the original Machzor Vitri, and we know this because the earlier Kitvei Yad that we have, which are Machzor Vitri, don't have all that stuff, and they all pretty much match each other except for all these additions. And so it ends up being very problematic, unfortunately, right? That a lot of the research and conclusions that people have come to based on what's in the printed Sfarim aren't actually necessarily accurate. And I don't want to open a can of worms, right? But I encourage anyone who's learning Gemara and is stuck in a sugya. There's a website called Hachi Garsinan. It's put out by the Friedberg the Friedberg Manuscript Trust. And it's free for anybody to get an account and register. You can put in there the daf and the amud that you're learning, and it'll bring you up the Kitvei Yad from that we have from that sugya, and it may be that you're getting stuck because in fact there's a problem with the girsa in the Gemara, and I know that's a sensitive topic for people, but I think it's really important and to as much as possible, right, to try to understand the origins and what the original text was. if you're not understanding Rashi on a sugya, maybe it's because Rashi had a different girsa than what you have in front of you. Because unlike the Tanakh, pretty much every other sefer that we have has not been passed down perfectly from generation to generation. There's a lot of variants that exists. We have Kitvei Yad of the Mishnayos, Kitvei Yad of the Gemaras, with a number of different variations in them. One of the things, Nachi, I wanted to kind of mention a little bit is the project that I was able to do and put together. I was able to do it only because of certain things that have kind of happened in the last 20 years or so in the world. Two major kind of advances that have taken place. The first is that libraries all over the world have digitized their manuscript collections. And so one of the, as I mentioned before, I've reached out to a number of different experts as I've been doing research in different areas. One of the experts that I had I'll call him my friend at this point, Professor Moshe Chalamish, who's really a world-renowned expert in the field of Kabbalah and Tefillah. So in one of our conversations, he kind of explained to me what his process was back in the day for doing his research and how he would have to fly to all these different libraries all over the world and sit there, for weeks and transcribe manuscripts and then, come home and off of his notes, so he went to, Cincinnati and took notes there, and then he went to the Vatican and he took notes there, and then he went to, all over the world, right? And after 3 years of whatever, he goes back to the notes that he took 3 years ago from Cincinnati, right, to try to now put it together into a book. And I have the luxury of sitting here in front of me, right, because these libraries have digitized themselves, and all the Kitvei Yad are available, and you can pull them up, and you can, in real time, kind of compare them to each other and see what's going on. And that just wasn't possible even 20 years ago, just because of the digitization of things. And then the other piece is the Friedberg Geniza project. Naki, are your listeners familiar with the story of the Cairo Geniza? Should I give a minute of background, or they know?
I've done some episodes on the Geniza. They're probably somewhat familiar, but you can do just a thumbnail sketch, just that for the purposes of this podcast and the context that they can understand what you're trying to say. That's fine.
Sure. So, in the late 19th century, basically there was 400,000 different pieces of paper cloth that were found in the attic in the Ben Ezra synagogue in Cairo, and were distributed all over the world, mostly in Cambridge, but really been distributed into a number of different places, and were studied extensively. Up until that point, our knowledge of the Siddur and Tefillot, we had a gap from essentially Chatimata Talmud up until the Kitvei Yad, the oldest Kitvei Yad of the Siddur that we have, let's say from the 13th century at that point. I don't know if they were aware of what we had from the 12th century. And you had a gap, right, of many hundred years between those two things. We really didn't know kind of what happened. And the Geniza opened our eyes to nusach we had no idea existed, and tefillot, and just tons and tons of really valuable manuscripts and fragments that are there. And the Friedberg Geniza project has collected images of as much as possible of all those manuscripts and put them online, also free for people to go and view. That is much less user-friendly, however, because you're essentially trying to find a needle in a haystack when you're looking through them. It's very difficult to search and sort, although some of them have been transcribed and you can do textual searches on them. But that also in the last 20 years really came to fruition, where there was availability to access those fragments of the Geniza, and so it wasn't really possible to do kind of what I did here, even 20 years ago, just because the access to all those things wasn't out there. And if I may, I want to thank a Dr. Amir Ashur from the University of Haifa, who really very graciously gave of his time to help me in this project. I did legwork in going through thousands of fragments in the Geniza and finding the ones that that were relevant. But then I turned them over to Dr. Ashur, because I don't have a clue, what's from the 9th century and what's from the 14th century. I've learned better now, right, in working with this stuff. But that's not an area of expertise of mine. And he went through each of the fragments and provided estimated dates. That's his area of expertise. And so that's obviously made a lot of what I've done here possible.
So I think we discussed a bunch of the Shina Neschais. Another thing that you do, I think I mentioned this, all the way on the top of each page, there's kind of a timeline. Starting, it says, Mikdash, Rabbanan, Ga'inim, Rishainim, Achrayim. And so you get kind of when this, I guess, when we first know of each passage, that's what you put in the timeline. And you bring that at the bottom of that a gray box, Hifia Besiddur, and you say exactly where it is, and you have notes on the bottom. Just what are the notes on the bottom as opposed to the Shina Neschais?
Yeah. So first of all, that kind of timeline graphic was actually as I was kind of deciding on the page format, I was bouncing that idea off a couple of people. I don't love it, right, because it's fairly limiting. Oftentimes you have a tefillah which the core of the tefillah is from a particular time, but then it was added onto at a different time. And so when you're trying on a page to just pin something at a particular time frame, but everyone that I spoke to said, no, you have to keep it. It's really important, right? For people that are just kind of browsing through and want to get a sense of something and not reading all the notes, it's really important to just at a glance be able to kind of see, this part of davening is earlier, this part of davening is later, and so it's helpful in that regard. The stuff in the gray box at the top is really more of the detail as far as the background of the tefillah goes, right? And so I'll reference there specific makoros, either in Kitvei Yad or in rabbinic sources, where the tefillah is brought and the time that is. Oftentimes, I'll bring the time from the Ktav Yad that I'm quoting as well, so that it might be brought in the name of Rashi, but it might be a Ktav Yad from the 15th century, just so that we're being honest with ourselves and understanding that things may have copied from until it got to that point. But I find the earliest manuscript that we have, and that's what I bring. I was also makpid in those footnotes at the bottom of the page. I tried to bring full text sources, which I feel like is a failing in a number of different scholarly kind of publications, because what ends up happening, and I was pained with this a lot, as I'm reading everything I can get my hands on and trying to look things up and find things, somebody will footnote something and good luck, finding exactly what it is that they were referring to. And so what I did is I brought the full text, the relevant text. Right? I didn't bring random paragraphs, but at least the relevant part of the text that I'm using to make my conclusion on or to make my point from. I'll bring there, both so that it's easy to find and people can see what it is, but also because if somebody wants to disagree with me, right, they have the text right there in front of them, and they're welcome to do so, because they can see why I felt. I had a great conversation with somebody a few months ago. I footnoted that, as far as Kriyat Shema, Alamita, and how many parshios we say, and Rav Amram has a shita there that's not brought in Seder Rav Amram, it's brought into Rishonim, relatively early Rishonim bring in the name of Rav Amram, that he holds that way, and that was, I felt, was good enough for me to say that was shitat Rav Amram, because the Seder, the manuscript that we have of Rav Amram is a mess, to put it kindly. But he felt otherwise. He felt, no, you can't say, unless it's in Seder Rav Amram, you can't say it came from Rav Amram. But the Seder, like, he has the basis. I put in the notes, right, that exactly what they said, and then people can kind of draw their own conclusions. And so that's a lot of what the notes are at the bottom of the page, as opposed to the Shinui Nuschos, which is specific textual. This word is different in this nusach or whatever. In the footnotes, it's about the sources. It's about when was it, when did we start saying this? Where is the text originally from? And that's what's in the footnotes in the bottom of the page.
So something that's we really have to mention here, because this is something that I did not discuss in my video because I really didn't realize this, and so I apologize to the listeners or those that watch that video, is that you include a live bibliography. There's a QR code in here that those can go online and check out. What is that? What did you include? What's the deal with that?
Yeah, so it's a good question. So if we're being honest, right, the price that I'm asking, and if any of your listeners haven't already been to the website and checked it out, and they will during or after this podcast at wiederpress.com. The price for the book is relatively expensive, and part of that is because it's taken a really long time for me to collect all these notes and put them together, and this is kind of what I'm doing full time now, and it needs to be able to support itself. But part of it is also because, in addition to a sefer, what you're getting is access to a really important database of what I call the living bibliography, right, of the sefer. And so let me explain what that is. First of all, one of the things that I found in looking through scholarly works is that they, suck up 30, 50 pages right at the end of the book with the bibliography of the articles and whatever, which is chabal on the trees and chabal on the publishing of the sefer. But even more than that, what I felt we can do in our current day and age is actually link to those articles, right? So what I've done is, as you mentioned, there's a QR code at the back of the sefer. You go to the website. You have to request access, and you only get access if you purchased a copy. But once you have access, you have in front of you a database with a bunch of different really useful. It's kind of a spreadsheet, right? So you have the bibliography, which has all of the articles that are quoted in the sefer, links to read those articles. Almost all of them are free. I found kind of free versions of almost all the articles online, so you can access. Some of them you have to register for, but you don't pay anything. And so you can read all the articles online. If you want more deep, like the article that I quoted in the name of Professor Barash about Brich Shmei, so there's 3-4 lines in the footnote in the bottom of the page on Brich Shmei, but you want to go more in depth, right? He's got a 12-page article that you can read about it and you can get there. But in addition to the bibliography and those live links, there are pages for the Geniza fragments, where you can sort and go through all the different Geniza fragments that I used in the book, see which ones were actually included in the book, but also a number of ones that were not included in the book. There's a lot more that were not included in the book, they are dated. You can sort by the date. They are, there are notes. So if you want to search for Kriyat Shema, or you want to search for Shemona Esrei or whatever, right, you can do that and find different hundreds of Geniza fragments that have to do with the weekday davening. There's another tab for Siddurim, for Kitvei Yad of Siddurim, and there as well, I list the location of the Ktav Yad. Obviously, I link to the Ktav Yad itself. I have the date of the Ktav Yad. I have the nusach of the Siddur when it's relevant. And so there's over 100 Siddur Kitvei Yad of Siddurim, printed Siddurim, then other manuscripts of just important work, right? So sometimes I was quoting Safrut HaHechalot, or I'm quoting the Aruch, or I'm quoting Eitz Chaim, or whatever the case may be, and so you have their links, right, to the oldest Ktav Yad that we have of all those Sfarim. Generally, when it was possible, I linked to exactly the passage that I quote in the Sefer, so you can easily bring it up and see it for yourself. But also, if you're interested in other parts of the Siddur, you can kind of usually get there pretty easily from the part that I link to, because the chelik of these Sfarim that deal with the text of the Siddur is generally a small part of the whole Siddur, and so you get access to this whole sort of database and a bunch of tools of additional links and information for anybody that wants to dig deeper. Obviously, if you're making a shiur about the Siddur, you're writing an article about the Siddur, it's just really incredibly valuable to have access to all that stuff. So that's kind of the other part of the package that you get when you buy a copy.
Another thing that's included in the Siddur as well, so there's an introduction, a short introduction, there's in the front, there's a short English introduction in the back. You also include, you have a nisbach, you have which is shinuyim shlenim tzoan be'edei nusach, so changes that aren't in, that you haven't found proofs to, but we know there are different variants. Tachnun Kadam, an earlier version, early Tachnun, you have that in the back. You also include a small zmanim of the Midrashim, as well as a chart of Ga'ainim and Rishainim and Balei Taisus, which is, nice. People are reading this Siddur and they're like, well, this is something that a lot of times Sfarim that have many sources and things like that they go through, and people aren't sure when did they live, what's first, what's after.
The Agur, right? When
exactly when did he live, and what am I reading? So you included that, which is very nice as well. And as I said, the Siddur, it's a really nice Siddur. Something as well. You did want to make people able to use it as their daily Siddur, so you did include Kriyas HaTorah. That's just the standard you'd find in the back of any standard Siddur. We just have the Kriyas HaTorah for every the of the parasha every week from Monday, Thursday, so you can kind of go through it. So someone can really use this as their daily Siddur if they want. And the ordering, as you said, it's like $50 so plus the shipping. So it is, like you said, you are paying a little more. It's a self-printing thing, and I did mention in the video sometimes the self-printing. The binding today is like it's almost like they take a paperback and they slap on some covers on it in the hardcover self-printing.
I'll just mention. So some people when they hear kind of print on demand or self kind of the self-published these type of books. So it used to be that when you would do this kind of thing, the glue they would use to hold the book together was not great, and you would be pretty much guaranteed that after 6 months or whatever, pages would start falling out, and you'd have issues with the quality of the sefer. So I'm using a factory which uses a special glue called PUR, which is really very heavy duty glue and doesn't have any of those issues, Baruch Hashem. And so it is self-published, but really the only nafkamina that you should have between this and the regular sefer is that the spine is flat instead of being curved. That's really the big nafkamina.
Yeah, it's not like a sewn binding. And this is happening more and more, by the way, for those that, you see this, you order even a lot of English books, academic books, many books are doing this. It's a print on demand. You don't have to lay out the money, whatever. We can discuss that. I think we'll mention here, we'll mention in a minute about your Wieder press and other things that you publish. And maybe perhaps another episode we can dedicate to discussing that, which is very interesting just in general for people, I think, are very interested in self-publishing and what goes into that, and the pros and cons of self-publishing versus using a traditional publisher, and versus laying out the money but not, and printing and things like that. So it's a very interesting conversation to have in its entirety, not specific to the Siddur. But one final question about the Siddur before we make a note on that, and there's much more we can talk about. I'm sure you can talk at length things that you've given some examples. If any other specific examples of something that you came across in your research that listeners might find revealing, you can say that here. But also, just in a final question besides that is what message, what you hope that people come away from this Siddur and from using this Siddur.
Yeah, so I think there were a ton of things that I found interesting to your first kind of half question there. So nothing else that I would mention kind of specifically, but there's surprises all over the place, really, with things that I've discovered. What I would hope at a minimum people come away with is the understanding that the Siddur really has never been a fixed book. It's evolved, and it's hard for us to see that because the printing press, and you have exactly a fixed text. But I think I mentioned earlier, there's almost no tefillah in the Siddur that we have today. Think of any outside of Kriyat Shema and whatever, but anything which was composed not from Tanakh, where you can go back 1,000 years ago and find a version that matches the one that we're saying today. There is, everything has changed. There's a Rashba and brachos that I bring down in my notes. who says very plainly that Anshe Knesset Gedola gave us kind of keywords that they wanted us to be using in the davening, but they didn't give us a fixed text. They didn't give us, some, prime nusach that, pristine and that needed to be carried on. But rather, their intention was to kind of give us a framework. There's a fantastic book which was which was put out by Uri Ehrlich on the Shmona Esrei, that sections from the Geniza on Shmona Esrei, and he found he looked through thousands of fragments in the Geniza for different variants in each bracha of Shmona Esrei. Each chapter in the book is a different bracha of Shmona Esrei, and most of the brachot of Shmona Esrei we have 60 different versions of. It blows your mind. So you'll say, oh, well, if you're talking 60 versions, you mean like some of them have a vav and some of them don't have a vav, and here and there. Some of those are the variations, okay? But some of them are not. Some of them are completely different brachos, right? With the exception of the chatim of the bracha, you have completely different nusach habracha. How does that happen, right? That's not from a mistake that somebody copied, they copied from somebody else over time. As the Rashba said, the original intention was not to have a fixed nusach, but rather a framework. And so if there's one takeaway that I would love people to have, it's just to understand a little bit more that nusach isn't quite as rigid as as maybe we've been trained to believe, and there's a little bit more flexibility in it than what we think.
So now about the book and the self-publishing and Wieder Press. Is that something that you're looking to expand? You publish a number of things, whether it's manuscript in Svarim, you publish now some other books and Svarim and things like that. Just if you could talk a minute briefly, and again, we can do this separately at a different time, about that, what the process is like with that.
Yeah, so as you mentioned, it's kind of it's a little bit of a lengthier conversation. I think it's probably might benefit some of your listeners as well. But as I went through the process of putting the sefer together and then bringing it to print, I brought it to a couple of the places that I felt would be appropriate for putting out this type of sefer. You can probably think of the names, and they basically told me, this is a great work of scholarship. We'd be very happy to, it would be a zchus for us to be able to publish this. We'd be happy to put our name on it. Just go find a donor that is willing to pay, $30,000 to handle the work involved, and we'll move forward. And so, I very quickly kind of said, it's not going to work for me. Let me go pursue other avenues. And I had just on my own been dabbling for many years. Sometimes there's Sfarim that are out of print, that the Zechuyos Yotzrim are gone, and you want your own copy of a sefer, your physical copy, but the sefer is available digitally for through whatever mechanism. And so I already knew kind of how to take a kovetz, take a file, and turn it into a printed book. And I started doing the research and eventually kind of figured out the different options there and what I felt was best. And because I did that, it opened up to maybe there's other Sfarim out there that might be of benefit to other people. And through my research, I came across a few different authors, a few different Sfarim that either weren't in print or had never been printed. And I reached out to them and said, hey, I can do this for you, basically with no upfront costs. I can put out your sefer, and was able to do that. As far as I guess the concept of Wieder Press, I'm continuing to engage with different authors that I feel are appropriate. The focus is kind of relatively narrow, which is I'll call mechkar torani, right? It's books that are for Yirei Shemayim, but to put it very simply, have a lot of footnotes and a lot of sources. I just put out Shevet Yehuda 5 volumes from Rev Yehuda Lavi ben David. That is not academic at all, right? All of his sources are rabbinic sources, but he does an incredible job of researching and bringing all those sources. And so, that's the type of thing that I'm focusing on and helping to bring it. And since I've been figured out how to do it, I'm happy to kind of share that experience and bring out other Sfarim under that label.
Okay, so I'll link to the book in the shows notes and your website, Wieder Press. Is it available in stores? Is there any way anyone can purchase it in any farm store? Or you have to order it via the link?
So Beagle Eisen actually has a full complement of all of the Wieder Press Svarim, including the Maharil and that I mentioned earlier, and the Shibbolei Leket I put out, and the other Svarim. So you can if you want to see it in person. Although the Siddur has a website which has a lot of information up on it. The Hakdama is up there, sample pages are up there for people to see. That's siddur.wiederpress.com. But if you want a physical copy, you want to hold something, so you can go to Beagle Eisen. They have their copies that you can touch.
Yeah, and Beagle Eisen, just to give them a plug here, they're in Borough Park. You can also call them. Their phone number is 718-436-1165, and you can WhatsApp them as well. And so if you're interested in purchasing it, that way versus just ordering it online. So thank you very much, Tzvi, for joining me. And like I said, we can get back and talk about, you've published, the various books you've published with Wieder Press, the manuscript of the Maril, and the other, other works that you're publishing, and I'm sure you're working on many others, and you published in Sfarim and Moshe Chalamish's volume. You've redone it, a second edition, one of his books. So there's other stuff there that then we can talk about that, and also, more in depth. There's more of a conversation about self-publishing than the little part that you said. It's really requires more of a conversation, especially in today's world and rising costs and Sfarim costs and what the rest of the layout and et cetera, and many different things. But this is really about the Siddur. A very unique Siddur. If someone's looking for something different, you want to change it up. You want to just, even if you want to, either to use it as a daily Siddur, or you want to just, it's very good for research. If something you want to use once in a while to pull it out. And so you can check that out in the show's notes. And I'll also link again to my YouTube video. You can kind of see it a little bit in the video. So thank you very much for joining me.
Nachi, thank you so much for having me. It was a pleasure.